what the Mishnah stated. On Shabbat, we know there are certain malachos on Shabbat, certain acts on Shabbat that if a person violates, let's say he's obligated to bring a korban chatat, obligated to bring a sin offering for doing this act, even though he, let's say he did the act, he didn't know that I was not allowed to do it. He was uneducated. He didn't have warning. He didn't know. He didn't go to yeshiva, or he went to yeshiva, but he didn't know this halacha. Or if a person knows the halacha but forgot that it was Shabbat, either one of those two scenarios, he or she would be chayav to bring a korban chatat, to bring a sin offering to the Beit HaMikdash for making such a mistake. So the Mishnah stated first that if someone extinguishes a light on Shabbat because he's afraid of robbers that might come and if they see a light burning, a Shabbat light burning or light burning, they might come, they might attack. So then the Mishnah says for that act, he would be patur. The Mishnah says someone extinguishes the fire because of the robbers to prevent danger. So the Mishnah says patur, and that he'll be patur for doing that because he had a right. He had a right to do that. It's not because he had a mitzvah. On the contrary, he had a mitzvah to protect sakanat nefashot. He had a mitzvah to go ahead and extinguish the light. So therefore, the Mishnah states that in that case, he would be patur. Then the Mishnah states, tichos al haner. If somebody extinguishes a fire on Shabbat because he's afraid that, let's say the candelabra that he's using to light is made out of earthenware, kli cheres. And earthenware is not such great material, and it's possible that it will break the menorah or the lamp that he's using will break on the Shabbat while it's burning. So therefore, he sees that it's looking bad, and he goes ahead and we're not talking about there was sakanat nefashot, that he had to go ahead and extinguish it because it was sakanat nefashot. Rather, wasn't that there was any danger, but rather there was just that he wanted to spare the candelabra, the lamp. Or kechos alaptila. If let's say the wick, he doesn't want the wick to be used up, so he says, if I extinguish the fire, now I'll have a wick to burn longer for the future. So and he extinguishes. Now one of the malachot of Shabbat, one of the acts that are forbidden to do on Shabbat, you're not allowed to make a fire on Shabbat, and you're not allowed to extinguish a fire on Shabbat. So he went ahead and he extinguished the fire. But we see the Mishnah is going to talk about why did he do it, the purpose of why it was done, how that's going to make a big difference of opinions. So if he spared because he wanted to save the wick, so the first opinion of the Mishnah states, chayav, he is obligated to bring a korban chatat, a sin offering, because he did the malacha, he did the act of extinguishing a fire on Shabbat. It wasn't that there was any danger of life. He did it with a purpose. It wasn't because there's a rule that if you do something that's destructive, which is called mekalkel, there's no obligation. It's not for Shabbat to be in violation of Shabbat. You have to, if you do an act that's destructive, you will not be chayav a korban. Here, it wasn't a destructive act by taking out the fire. He took out the fire from the lamp for a purpose. The malachot of Shabbat, one of the malachot of Shabbat. Welcome back, Simon. Look at that. Ruchim habayim of all your big travels. We're so happy to see you back. And let's say there's a malacha called mechika. One of the malachot on Shabbat is you're not allowed to erase. You can't take a letter. If you erase a letter on Shabbat, you're in violation of, that's one of the malachot on Shabbat. That's only if you erase something for the purpose of writing something else in its place. So therefore, the erasing is for a purpose. Similarly, demolishing. If you would break a building on Shabbat, take apart a building on Shabbat, demolition on Shabbat, if the demolition is for the purpose of just to destroy, you just want to break down a building, then there's no obligation of chatat, of sin offering, because it was a destructive act. But if you do demolition for the purpose of building in its place, then it's a productive act, and then there will be a violation because of demolition. So, Simon, we are on 31b2. So now, Simon, the Gemara is talking about if a guy extinguishes a fire on Shabbat, and he extinguishes the fire because he wants to save the wick, okay? Or he extinguishes the fire because he wants to go ahead and protect the lamp. So the first opinion says chayav. The first opinion says he's chayav, he's obligated to chatat. And the second opinion says, Rabbi Yossi poteh bekulam. Rabbi Yossi says, if you go ahead and you extinguish a fire because you want to save on the oil, or you extinguish good morning, or you extinguish a fire because you want to protect the lamp, Yossi says that's called patur. That's called, it would be patur, and we're going to explain this in a minute. Chutz min hapsila. The one case that Rabbi Yossi says that you will be obligated is the nei shu'osa pecham. That when you go ahead and you extinguish the wick, you are making we're going to see in the Gemara one explanation, you're going to make the wick now easier to light in the future. So again, we have a machloket, we have a disagreement in the Mishnah. Simon, you got it, 31b2. We have an argument in the Mishnah whether when you take out a fire for the purpose of saving the oil, or whether you take out the fire because you want to protect the lamp, if you are in violation on a Torah level, then you have to go ahead and bring a chatat. There's no question, even the opinion that says patur, right? There is an opinion that says that if you're sparing the oil, you want to save the oil, you are patur. Patur means the general rule is patur, you're exempt from the sin offering. Well, patur aval asur, but it's a forbidden act, right? You can't do it. No, there's no argument. No, everybody agrees you can't extinguish a fire on Shabbat for whatever reason, unless it's a sakana, unless it's a danger. But whether there's a Torah violation, so the Mishnah states there's an argument whether there's a Torah violation when you took out the fire because you wanted to save the oil. Let's say we'll focus on that case. So the Gemara jumps to try to understand what is the issue over here. Now, a little background. We have something called a malacha shetzricha legufa, and we have a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. When you do malacha on Shabbat, let's say a person goes ahead and he plows a field, right? He does the act. Let's say he goes ahead and he takes. He wants to go ahead and he wants the dirt. I need dirt because I'm going to. I have a mitzvah to cover the blood of a bird or a wild kosher animal when I slaughter a kosher animal or bird. So I go ahead and I chop the ground. I chop the soil for the purpose. And now, generally, when you chop soil, chopping the soil, I'm softening the soil. I'm making it easier for for myself to plow, to plant, right? That's one of the malachot on Shabbat that's called uh, charisha, right? That's called morning Morris. That's called charisha. That's called plowing. But if I go ahead and I not because I good morning Mark.
Morning, Rabbi.
Mark, the iPhone 78 is Jaime, by the way, Mark.
Oh, Jaime. Good
Look at
morning,
that.
brother. I love you.
Very
It's
good.
in Jaime's zechut that I'm in this class. Don't forget that, H.
I love you, Mark.
You asked me to join this class
I
a
love
couple
you.
years ago. You remember that?
I sure do.
Okay.
All right.
Jaime, there used to be a commercial many years ago. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen.
Yeah,
Remember that? You're
only
not
Mark is
smart.
E.F. Hutton.
Yeah, right.
Um, okay. So we're talking about here on Shabbat, when you do a malacha, you do an act, but the act was not done specifically for the let's say the way it was done in the Mishkan. Let's say you did the act, you did the malacha, like we gave an example. Let's say you plowed, but you plowed not because you needed to plow. You needed the plowing. We said, we gave an example, you broke the ground, you wanted the dirt of the ground, because you wanted to use the dirt to cover the blood of a bird that you just slaughtered. So you did a malacha. You did an act of plowing, right? Because let's say by breaking the soil, you now soften the soil. But you didn't soften the soil for the purpose of plowing, right? You soften the soil for some other purpose. You're not interested in the plowing. You soften the soil because you wanted the dirt to cover the blood of an animal. So that type of act, when you do an act, but for some other purpose, not for the general purpose of the act, would would a person be in Torah violation or not? Or meaning to say, do you have to go ahead and do the act with the intention of what that act usually is for? Let's say for plowing, you did an act of plowing. So does it have to be you did the act of plowing for the purpose of plowing, or if you did the act of plowing for some other purpose, that you also would be in violation. Good morning, Asaf. Good morning, Sunny. Good morning, Asaf. Good morning, Ronnie. So that's what the Gemara is going to introduce us to the following. Let's see the Gemara. How the Gemara is going to talk it out. Rabbi Yossi, Kamansri relay. Rabbi Yossi, who says that if you take out a fire on Shabbat, you have an oil lamp burning, and you wanted to spare the oil. So again, one of the malachot, one of the 39 malachot on Shabbat, one of the 39 acts of work is extinguishing a fire. But here, you extinguish the fire for not because you wanted to create a coal, right? Let's see, you light a fire, and someone lights a fire, and then you take out the fire, now you made a coal. So the extinguishing is for the purpose of making a coal. But here you did the extinguishing for some other purpose, not the general purpose of extinguishing. You did it because you wanted to go ahead and save on the oil. So, and meaning to say, when you want to save on the oil, you're not interested in the extinguishing. Meaning you don't need it. If you would be able to save on the oil without the extinguishing, you would be happy to save on the oil without the extinguishing. It's not like, when you want to make a coal, you extinguish it because you need the extinguishing to make the coal. Hey, you're not interested in the extinguishing for itself. So that is the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says the following. And the commentary says, when you extinguish a fire because you want to save on the oil, that's called a malacha, an act that's not needed for itself, meaning you're not fixing something, you're not creating something, right? A malacha, Shabbat, right? Generally, a malacha is something that you're creating something, you're making something, you're improving something. But what you're doing here, you're just preventing a loss. So that's a malacha, but you did an act. You did an act. What's the act that you did, Morris? You extinguished the fire. But what's unique about this act is you extinguished the fire, but you didn't do it for a particular something productive happened as a result of your act. Right, exactly. You did it because you had some ulterior, some side benefit, but not because you needed this act. Rabbi Yehuda, so there's a major argument in the Tanoim regarding such an act. Such an act, would it be a Torah violation? Would you say on Shabbat, the same way if you would go ahead and do an act for a productive purpose, morning, that you need this act, you would be obligated. So too, even if you don't need this act, so to speak, you're not fixing something by a result of it, but just because it has a purpose, like the purpose here is, it's not destructive, you're saving on the oil, so that's good enough. You met the bar to be obligated on Shabbat of extinguishing, right? You met the bar, so if you go ahead and you take out the fire, you're in violation. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Good morning. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon says that type of act, if you go ahead and if you go ahead and do an act on Shabbat, let's say I gave you the example. I went ahead and I broke the soil. I removed the soil from the ground, but I did not do it to soften the ground for that purpose. I'm not interested in softening the ground. I don't need the softening of the ground, let's say. I went ahead and I did it because I wanted the dirt. So Rabbi Shimon says that's a malacha, a good act of plowing, but it's not needed. It wasn't needed. It's not a constructive act. And that type of constructive act, and that act will not be in violation. That is the two opinions between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Now, taking out a fire, taking a wick. By the way, these concepts are not so simple. They need a lot of thinking, working it out. Taking a wick, if you have a new wick, and you go ahead and you extinguish the wick, right? So sometimes, a wick that was never lit before, right? You have a new wick. So, if you want to make a wick easy to light, so one of the ways to make a wick easy to light is by lighting it and then extinguishing it. And when you light it and you extinguishing it, the extinguishing makes it easier for it to relight it again, correct? So therefore, Simon, that extinguishing is a productive act, right? If I go ahead, Morris, and I go ahead and I take a wick that I just lit, a new wick, and I light it and I blow it out. So that blowing out, that extinguishing is an act that I need, is productive. It did something. The extinguishing did something. And that would be called a act that's needed for itself, a productive act for itself. Now, by the way, there are in some communities, the husband lights the Shabbat candle and he blows it out right away. Why is that? It doesn't say a bracha, because he wants to be involved in helping the Shabbat, and by lighting and blowing it out right away makes the wick easier to light. That when his wife will light the candle, light the wick, it'll catch right away. How do you like that, Morris? So there's a mitzvah that every person should be involved in Shabbat. Every person, the husband, really it's brought down the different rabbis would be involved. Rava would salt the fish. Different rabbis did different things. One rabbi chopped the wood before Shabbat for what was needed. Different rabbis did different things. There's a special mitzvah that every person, doesn't make a difference what status you are, to be involved, do something in honor of the what? Of the Shabbat. So the Gemara is trying to understand Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi makes a difference between the case of sparing the oil, where he says if you spare the oil, Rabbi Yossi says you're not in Torah violation. But if you go ahead and you spare the wick, if your intention is to save the wick, you are in the Gemara understands that you will be in violation. What's the difference? Morning, Boker Tov. What's the difference in sparing the oil and sparing the wick? If Rabbi Yossi says, if you're sparing the oil, that act of extinguishing is not considered, morning, Mark, that act of extinguishing is not considered a act for itself. It's not considered. So what did you say? It's a related, right? But it's not right. It's not. I'm not fixing anything by extinguishing for when I extinguish a lamp because I want to save on the oil. I'm not interested. It's not that the extinguishing is not making something big better. It's not improving anything, right? It's not fixing something. It's not a productive act in itself. It's just preventing. It's a side thing. That's what you call a related thing. That's what you call it, Mark. It's a side benefit, but it's not, meaning to say, if let's say this oil, if let's say it would be magic oil that never goes out, right? That it will remain burning, and you won't lose any oil. So I have no purpose. I have no purpose of extinguishing. I'm not extinguishing for. I'm not interested in extinguishing. I have no interest in extinguishing. It's not doing anything. It's not creating anything for me.
Here between the object itself, the move, the body of the object, and also the shitot of the Tanaim, Rabbi Yehuda, דבר שמתכוון חייב, דבר שלא מתכוון חייב. So you can say that combination, like maybe if the question is, Rabbi Shimon, דבר שלא מתכוון גם כן שצריך לגוף ושלא צריך לגוף, ורבי יהודה, דבר שמתכוון חייב גם when he doesn't need the body and need the body, or it's like it comes together. So when Rabbi Shimon can say like, even if I don't need the body, the דבר שלא מתכוון, אני אהיה פטור. And likewise,
But the Gemara here is focusing on Rabbi Yossi of the Mishnah. Because Rabbi Yossi says that if you're sparing the oil, if you take out the fire because you want to save the oil, you're not in violation of the Shabbat. But if you take out the fire because you want to spare the wick, you'll be in violation.
Which means, to me, something that's you gain another thing.
So if you gain that,
Another unrelated benefit, it's a violation. If it's in and of itself, it's not a violation. That's that.
maybe what if I say the other way? Why don't you say if I benefited for itself, if there was some productive act, how you if it was a productive act in itself, I needed this act. I needed this milacha.
Saving oil productive.
It's a productive, but not that I need the act of extinguishing.
You need it.
I need it just
you need to extinguish if you want to save the oil.
But the extinguishing is not creating anything. It's just preventing. Meaning it's not
That's to be positive.
Right. It's not
That's to be positive.
right. So that's one opinion. One opinion, it has to be a positive effect, constructive, exactly. And the other opinion says no. As long as you did the act, I extinguished. So even though it wasn't a constructive act, but it met the Because since sometimes it's done in a constructive act, so as long as I didn't do it in a destructive way, right? Because there's like three levels, right? It's neutral. There's destructive, constructive, and neutral for some other reason. So that is so everybody agrees when it's constructive, it's right. If I needed the act, if I need to create something, if the extinguishing will create something, meaning that will be the case. Let's say if the Gemara chata. If I'm being destructive, I don't bring a chata. But it's still forbidden. Destructive no chata, right?
So destructive and neutral are equal.
Say it again.
Destructive and neutral are equal.
So neutral is the question. That's the argument of the rabbis. It's neutral. It's not destructive, serving a purpose, but it's not a constructive act in itself. It's not that.
Give us a destructive one.
If you go ahead and you break down a building with the intention just to break down a building, that's a destructive act. And therefore you will not be in Torah violation, even though one of the third malachos is demolition, destructing a building, taking down a building. But if you do it for the purpose of just destructing, you want to take down a building, or an easier example would be erasing. In the Mishkan, they had the boards, and on the boards they would write the number, which board, like on a sukkah, you write the number on the board, what number board, you put, 1, 2, 3, that the board should be aligned, which boards are next to each other. What about if you made a mistake on the writing on the board? So they would erase it. And so on Shabbat, that was a malacha, erasing. Now, why was it constructive? Because they would erase it for the purpose, so that erasing was for the purpose of rewriting, to write the right number. So therefore, the erasing is a constructive act. Just like demolition for the purpose of rebuilding, when you call a demolition team in to break down your house because you want to rebuild the house, that's a constructive. That demolition is actually a constructive act, right? And specifically for that purpose, right? So these are some examples that you can have the same act one time. Now the act is actually, if it's not for a constructive if you're just doing it to break down the house without to rebuild, that's destructive. Erasing just to erase is destructive, and you will not won't be a violation. A tent matters, exactly. A tent is a big is a big deal in Shabbat. So now the Gemara is trying to understand what's the difference. We are 31b2. Kichos al haner. In the first column, it's the second column, top of the page. Rabbi Yossi makes a distinction between taking out a fire on a lamp because you want to spare the oil, or sparing the wick. And the Gemara wants to understand what is the difference between both. Now, both cases, you did the act of extinguishing, right? If you take out the fire because you want to save on the oil, you extinguished it. You took out the wick, you blew out the wick because you want to save on the wick because you don't want the wick to burn out. You did extinguishing. But yet, Rabbi Yossi makes a difference. He says, one act you would be chayav, by the wick you would be a violation, and by the oil you're not. So the Gemara asks the question: Rabbi Yossi kaman surele. Who does Rabbi Yossi agree with regarding the laws of Shabbat? Does he hold that a malacha, an act that's not needed for itself? I need that act for its constructive purpose. Am I obligated or not obligated? Who those you're a chayav, your violation either way, as long as it's neutral or above. Only the construct, right? Only because I needed that act. That's what the Gemara says. If he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that if you do an act that's not needed for itself, but I did the act, I am in violation. So even the case where I'm extinguishing the fire because I want to save on the oil, or I want to save I want to protect the lamp, I should be obligated because it's also part of even though I'm not being constructive, I'm not fixing anything on this act. I'm not doing anything. I'm not building anything.
When it says he exempts from your seal,
I mean, Rabbi Yossi is the one who exempts. Rabbi Yossi, he said he can't hold like Rabbi Yehuda because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. So then it should be then it should be chayav. Then it should be why if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda that if you do an act on Shabbat, a malacha, but you don't need that but you didn't do any constructive act by that act. You didn't need it. It wasn't that you didn't need this act to be done for. You weren't interested in, so to speak, in the constructive aspect of it. Well, like you said, if you take out a fire, right, you're not the taking out of the fire, you did not fix, and you weren't interested to make something by taking it out. It wasn't constructing anything by taking out the fire. So you should even be chayav even by taking out the fire for ulterior motives. If you hold like Reb Shimon, then it has to be the malacha in order to be obligated. It has to be done for that specific constructive purpose. It's not enough just to do the act for a neutral purpose, for a side purpose. It has to be that you needed to construct something from it. So why is he saying that the act of the wick? Why is the wick? If you spear the wick, you're obligated. When you spear a wick, right? Rabbi Huda would say if you spear the wick, but why would Rabbi Yossi if you hold like Rabbi Shimon? Now, if I spear the wick, I'm not. I mean, I didn't do a constructive act. I didn't create anything, and this act didn't build something for me. Something wasn't created as a result of the act. I just prevented something from burning. So why should I be chayav? That's the Gemara's question. Exactly the Gemara's question. Why is it? What's the difference between saving the oil by extinguishing for the purpose of saving the oil, or extinguishing for saving for the wick? What? Right. That's what the Gemara is going to say at the end. What approach of the Gemara is when you extinguish for the wick, if your intention was to make the wick a better wick, so therefore the extinguishing actually was. It makes it easier for light. The extinguishing actually was a creative act. It was a constructive act. I needed the extinguishing. I want the extinguishing. The extinguishing is creating something. So when your act is creating something, and then the Gemara is going to say that's why he would hold that there's a distinction between the wick and the oil. Because the wick, I need the act of extinguishing to make this wick. The extinguishing is not just I'm having a side benefit from the extinguishing. The extinguishing is actually something that's making something. It's producing. It's producing what the extinguishing act is fixing the wick. It's making the wick a better wick. So that right, Mara? So therefore, that's what the Gemara. That's nuance. The Gemara is going to say is why the extinguishing act of the wick is different than extinguishing for the save on the oil. Save on the oil. I did not build anything. The intention was not to construct something. I wasn't fixing anything. That's what the Gemara says. Ula. But before the Gemara says that, the Gemara says something else. Ula. Ula suggests a different approach. He wants to say that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yossi holds that, like Rabbi Yehuda, that an act that's not needed for itself. If you did the malacha, you did the act. What's the act? The act is extinguishing. If you did it, even if it's not for let's say it's not that you needed the extinguishing to create something, still he holds it's in violation. But Ksava, he holds, Ksava Rabbi Yossi holds, Soter amanat livnot b'mkomo havisoter. If you go ahead and you break down a building with the intention of building something in that place, right? I broke down the building on 7, let's say East 10th. You broke down 7 East 10th because you want to rebuild on 7 East 10th. So that's an act of demolition that is obligated on Shabbat, even though acts of destruction are exempt, and demolition, breaking down a building, you would say is a destructive act. But when you break down the building with the intention to rebuild in its place, so therefore that it's not a destructive act. You needed the demolition in order to rebuild. So the demolition is actually a constructive act. But however, amanasha lo livnov mikomo lo havisoter. If you break down a building, the Gemara is now saying, Mark, that Rabbi Yossi, the Gemara's Ula wants to say, really, Rabbi Yossi holds like Rabbi Yehuda. That if you do an act, even if you don't need the act itself, the malacha, the work that you did, the act that you did was not something that you needed. I didn't need the ground to be plowed when I took out the dirt because I wanted to cover the bird. I didn't need it, but it was done. It was plowed because I took out the dirt. I softened the ground. I took the spike, whatever you call it, and I broke the ground. And now it's easier to plow. But that act of plowing was not for the purpose of softening the ground. I did it because I wanted the dirt for some other purpose. So he owes, but you did, at the end of the day, you plowed. I don't care why, as long as you weren't destructive, you did it. Even though you didn't need it, you didn't create anything, it wasn't productive for you, so to speak, it didn't create anything for you.
Then there is no distance between like if I need the body of the object that I'm using or not need the object, the intention, and that's the loop between body and there is also the loop between you need the body of the object that you're going to use. So that is not in account here. Yeah, we're just going by the version with the version of
Right, we're talking about your intention, right? Your intention is right. So it's your intention. What was your intention? And here the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi holds that even though we have this rule that you have to go ahead, that Rabbi Yossi says even if it's not needed for its own purpose, you're chayav. But the issue here is taking out a fire. When you take out a fire, that's like soter. That's like demolition. You're breaking something down. Now, in order to be obligated by demolition, you have to, Rabbi Yossi holds, you have to demolish something with the intention of rebuilding in the same place. I mean, it's a separate point. Meaning, even if I hold, but even when you do a demolition, the Yechayav, again, the demolition itself, but demolition is unique because demolition, the act of demolition is a destructive act.
Whose opinion are you comparing?
So now we're comparing, we want to know what's the law by demolition with the intention of doing demolition for the purpose of building somewhere else. Everybody. According to even Rabbi Yossi, who hold, even Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda, or even Rabbi Yehuda holds an act, even if you're not needed for itself, you will be obligated. But if the act is an act of destruction, so now we're getting into a different area. It's not a neutral situation. So taking out the fire of oil is now it's a destructive act. You're breaking something down. You're taking. So now he holds the only way you would be obligated is when you take out a fire for the purpose because I want to rebuild in its place. So if I take out the fire because I want to save the wick, that means I'm taking out the fire to rebuild in this for the purpose of this wick. So then it will be obligated. But if I take out the fire because I want to spare the fire, then I'm not. It's not with intention to rebuild it. Then it's destructive. That's why if you want to spare the oil, you're not in violation. But if you want to spare the wick, where you're intending to rebuild in this spot, this wick, you're relighting, you're extinguishing. That's productive, and that's more than productive. It's you're rebuilding with intention to rebuild in its place, and therefore you intend to rebuild in its place, then be obligated. You don't need to have.
So destructive on its own, not necessarily.
Everybody would agree. Destructive, if you're destructive, you're not chayav.
Destructive with the intent to
Recreate, you're chayav. But if you're destructive to recreate in a different spot, I'm breaking down this building here because I want to build a building somewhere else. Let's say I want to break down this building here and for some reason I'm with the intention I'm going to break down this building because I want to build a building there next door. Then we're saying that is considered a destructive act. But what is this? That's pure destructive, will not be obligated. And therefore, if you take out the fire, spare the oil, that's called destructive. Okay, it's a very not simple Gemara, everybody. It's a heavy Gemara, everybody. Have a great day, everybody. It's already 7:28. I'm sorry it's running a little late. Went a little overtime.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day,
Have a
everybody.
great day.
Ronnie, Saf,
Thank you.
Morris, you